Good morning, everybody. A very, very warm welcome to you all. Thank you very much for joining us today. We are here as part another webinar as part of the CityFibre Digital Academy, and delighted to once again be joined by Craig Atkins, who's MD at OneFix, who will be talking to us today about how charities can use Microsoft Copilot to help them grow. If you do have any questions, please use the Q&A or the chat box. We will have some time at the end for anyone who has any questions. If Craig doesn't cover the topic, I'm sure he will, but any questions at the end, we can cover those. But without further ado, I'll hand you over to Craig. Craig, go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. I'm just going to share my screen so we've got the slides. Give me just a second. Perfect. I think we're good. Excellent. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. So today, we're going to cover off kind of a broad overview of Microsoft Copilot and help you understand how this can help you potentially use this as a tool to scale up and grow the work that you do within your charitable organization. So a bit about Copilot. If you're not familiar with what it is and how it works, Copilot is your kind of AI assistant. So it's today we're talking about something called Copilot for Microsoft 365. Microsoft are very good at doing this thing where they name everything the same. So you'll probably have noticed over the last sort of 6 to 9 months, you've started to see this kind of Copilot logo that you can see at the top of this slide starting to appear across Windows, and Copilot is getting embedded into all things Microsoft. So Copilot as a term is their general term for AI technology and AI tooling. And there is a completely free version of Copilot. So you might have come across that within Windows. There is a Copilot tool already, and there is Copilot. If you happen to use Bing search, you'll find Copilot popping up results for you. But today we're talking about something called Copilot for Microsoft 365. So that is one of the Copilot tools. It is it's a paid for piece of software essentially that bolts into your Microsoft environment, and what it does is it helps you to unlock productivity by using natural language. So that's your chat, like if you've used ChatGPT, that same kind of technology, but where it adds some benefits here is it has access to your data. So again, in Microsoft techie terms, and we'll try and keep this completely non-technical, Microsoft have something called Graph. Graph is essentially their ecosystem of all of your data. So when you put documents into SharePoint, or you put things in your OneDrive, or you've got emails on your Outlook, they all live in something called Microsoft Graph, which is the Microsoft ecosystem. And so Copilot brings together all of this stuff. So it brings together kind of large language, which is your kind of ChatGPT type thing. It brings together Graph, which is your data, your Microsoft 365 apps. So that's again Excel, PowerPoint, Word, and also the ability to search the internet. So there we go. And using Microsoft's comprehensive approach. So Microsoft basically use Copilot. Within Copilot, they wrap up security, compliance, privacy, and they have a policy around responsible AI. I'm not going to go too deep into that stuff today. I'm happy to answer questions on it if you want to put anything into the chat. But essentially, the key thing to remember if you're thinking about using Copilot is that it follows all of the security policies and all the kind of enterprise security stuff that wraps around Microsoft 365. So if you're already trusting Microsoft with your data that's in SharePoint and OneDrive, then you're very safe with Copilot in terms of what it can do and what it can access. So quick little teaser video here. Hopefully this shows through to you okay. So showing some examples of kind of what Copilot can and can't do, how it works. That's the Microsoft marketing pitch out of the way. So how can charities use Copilot to grow, and how can you use Copilot for 365? So what I'm going to do, it's very difficult for me to kind of give you a live demo because it's very difficult to show you something that doesn't then pull in live data. So we at OneFix, we use Copilot within all of our organizational bits and pieces. But if I was to give you a live demo, I'm going to start to expose things that are obviously going to bring me a bit of a GDPR challenge. So what I wanted to do today in this presentation is talk you through the different examples of how Copilot works in different tools. And then I'm going to show you a really quick live demo on a completely different tool that essentially doesn't really have any of my data in there, so I can show you something. But what I would like to say again, if you're watching this and you get through to the end and you think this is actually something that looks really interesting, we're very happy we can arrange some Copilot deep dives, and we can actually give you we can run demo sessions, we can run demo data, and also we can potentially use it on your data. So there are options there to show you how it works for you, but you kind of have to just put your visualization head on here and imagine what we're going to talk through. So one of the first things with Copilot is you can use it in chat. So you'll have, if you're again, when you go onto the web or you do Teams or anything like that, you'll see that often there's a Copilot Microsoft 365 chat button. And what that lets you do is it gives you some ideas here, and hopefully you can see my mouse pointer moving around, but it gives you some ideas here of things that you can do. I appreciate these are going to be a bit tricky to read, but it's giving you ideas like find open issues. I want to write an intro to an email. I want to list action items from a meeting. But basically, you can use Copilot to comb across the data that you've got and find things within your files and folders. So within this chat, it's if you imagine this part here is like your chat GPT, you can ask it questions. You can ask it questions about things that it knows about within your Microsoft environment. So you can say, for example, I have a webinar coming up today. Help me prepare for the webinar, and it will go off. And if I ran that in my Copilot, it would go and find emails from Sarah at TVCC, and it will say, "Here's what the webinar's about. Here's the content you need to prepare." So for busy people, again, within charities, some of the challenges that we see is that people are in and out. They're moving across a lot of different roles. You have volunteers that are dropping in and out of the organization. So Copilot can help you kind of pull together all the information that might be spread across Teams meetings, emails, Word documents, and pull that all together and be able to just search that with natural language. We also see this Copilot chat really useful for, because Copilot, again, ingests all of that information that you might have in, say, your SharePoint. What it can do is you can ask it questions, say, for example, about HR policy. So if you have a volunteer that comes along and they want to know, for example, what is your policy on, I don't know, bringing your own devices to work for IT, they can search what is our charity bring your own device policy. It will go off and it will find that document and it will read it back to them. It's a really, really, really easy way to provide people very quick skills and access to information. The next place that we see Copilot being incredibly useful is within Microsoft Teams. So you'll start to see a theme here. There is pretty much Copilot within every one of the Microsoft 365 applications. Copilot in Teams, what this helps you do is essentially you need to record the meeting or you need to turn on transcription. So there is a potential privacy issue. You do have to get permission for people to turn Copilot on. If you have the meeting recorded, Copilot will do a bunch of things. It will kind of take so when you record a meeting in Teams anyway, you get a kind of a transcript of what people are saying. Copilot ingests that and it kind of reads it and understands it. At the end of the meeting, it will then produce you kind of an AI report. So it will say, here's all the notes from the meeting, a bit like a minuted note taker. So here's the key themes that have just been discussed. Here's the tasks and actions that have been agreed. It will do that for you automatically. You also get this you can hit the Copilot button within Teams and you get this kind of chat box down the side within the meeting. And this is private to you. This is your Copilot chat. So you can start to ask Copilot within the Teams meeting that you're in, what did Steve just say about the budget for 2026? And it will go and kind of read that and repeat it back to you. So, and you can ask it to do things. So you can ask it to say, create a table of pros and cons for a topic, and it might be something you're discussing in the meeting, and it will pull together all the pros and cons people have said, and it will build out a table for you. You can ask it to create me some next steps. You can ask it which questions have been asked in the meeting that haven't been answered yet, all these kind of things. If you don't record the meeting because you're not allowed to, for example, because of privacy policies, if you have a license, can still turn on Copilot. So you can still hit the Copilot button and the person in the meeting that you're meeting with will get a message saying that you're using it. But it does not persist outside of the meeting. So whilst you're in the meeting, you can use this sidebar, you can ask questions, you can ask it to generate the meeting notes. But the minute you close the meeting off, that information is gone and is not retained. So the key thing with Copilot in Teams, if you're recording the meeting, you can access that all the time. If you're not, you can't. So this is the intelligent recap. So this is what I was saying. When you have recorded the meeting, what you'll get is an option to kind of step in, and what you can see is you get, as I said, your meeting notes, you get your follow-up tasks. It will show you who's spoken and kind of what periods they've spoken across. And then you can open up that Copilot side window and then have conversations and ask Copilot things about the meeting. So this is really, really useful. And where this plays really strongly for charities and nonprofits is, again, when you have people that probably aren't with you all the time. You may have people that are with you for 2 days a week, 3 days a week. If they are added to the meeting, they don't have to attend it. But if they've been added to the meeting and they have a Copilot license, then they can go back to the meeting afterwards. They can see this recap. They can obviously go back and watch the video if they want to, but they can actually use Copilot to ask it questions, so they can really quickly catch up on things that have been discussed, and they can obviously see the notes and tasks. So this saves a lot of time for people, especially when you're if you struggle with note taking, or you struggle with the fact of knowledge sharing across meetings. You have Copilot in Outlook, and what Copilot in Outlook will let you do is to summarize emails. So again, if you've got someone sent you a great long email, you can hit the Copilot button, ask it to summarize the email thread. You can ask it to draft replies. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of that. I think I'd still like to write in my own tone, but I find it is quite useful to use Copilot there in Outlook to kind of go and summarize the stuff that's in your inbox and understand what's happening. Having Copilot have access to the emails is actually probably more useful, I think, in things like the Copilot chat, where you want to say, prepare me something, give me all the information of what I've spoken to Sarah Irving about in the last 3 months, and it will go away and it'll comb all of your emails, all of your documents, and it'll pull that back and present it back to you. But yeah, Copilot does exist in Outlook. Copilot in Word, for nonprofits, this is probably where we see a large chunk of the usage. So Copilot is incredibly useful for helping you create new documents, summarize things that are within a document. You can ask it you can drop into a document at any point, and you can say, write me 3 paragraphs about a particular thing. It can reference other documents. So again, if you have let me think of a good example. If you have say a bid document or a funding document, you can reference that document. As long as you've put it into your SharePoint or your OneDrive, you can point Copilot at that document, and you could say, bearing in mind this particular fundraising spec, please write me 3 paragraphs as to why we would meet these criteria, and these are the things we're going to do. And you can give it lots of information, and the more information you give it, the better. But the fact you can ask it to reference other documents and you can get it to craft off the back of that makes it incredibly useful for, again, things like bid writing, fundraising bids, document creation based on other documents. So taking something like a very dry, I don't know, a very long health and safety policy, for example, and saying, create me a 1-page summary of this that can be a handout for people as a quick training guide. Again, Copilot can just do that heavy lifting really, really quickly. So incredibly useful as a productivity tool within Word. I think for me, that's one of the most compelling parts of Copilot, is that piece within Word and the piece within Teams. Copilot within Excel. So again, as I said, it's across all the Microsoft tools. So with Excel, where Copilot is useful within Excel, you have to have your data in a table. So that's one thing you have to, as you can sort of see on the demo that's running on the screen, you have to kind of tabulate the data, which is quite quick to do, but then you can ask Copilot questions about that data. And it's quite good at doing formulas. So that's the thing that I think some people find Excel straightforward enough to kind of put data in, but they struggle maybe to do some more complicated formulas or to ask it to do things. And there's an example here on the screen that says, for example, prompt, make all the cells red where the value is under 1,000, and it will go and create that filter. It will show you it on the right hand side, and you can apply it to the table. And you can do some quite clever stuff. You can ask it some quite clever questions about the data, and it will help you pull through that. So the Excel Copilot, again, from a nonprofit perspective, the value there is probably, for those, again, that are working with numbers, finance teams, people that are going to have to process through a lot of data. It's understanding that it can do quite a lot of stuff for you, and it actually helps the less powerful Excel users, I suppose, become a bit more of a power user, because rather than having to work out what formula they need to do and try and work out how to do it, they can ask the question in natural language in the side, and Copilot will work out how to do that, and it will give you that output. I say I'm not going to say it's absolutely perfect, but I would say the testing I've done with it, 95% of the time, it's understood exactly what I've wanted to do, and it has produced the correct kind of output. Copilot in PowerPoint. So again, here there's some quite good stuff you can do, and this is the great thing with Copilot, I must say, because it is it's a bit like with Microsoft 365. They do keep making it better. They keep adding features. So Copilot in PowerPoint was probably one of the weaker parts for a while, but very recently it's got a lot better. So it can use your branding, so you can create branding packs, and it will create slides based on your branding and your view and your visuals. You can ask it to create a presentation based on just giving it a brief, and it'll do a pretty good job. It's not a bad starting point to get you going. I would always suggest you probably want to tweak it and add your own spin to it, but you can use it to do that. But what you can do, and this is again where the power really is if you have something that's a document, so something like a Word document or a PDF, you can point it towards that and say, create me a presentation from this. So again, we had an example with a client, it wasn't a non-profit, but a client that was doing something, and they had hazard sheets, so COSH sheets, so kind of chemical safety sheets around different chemicals that they had within the business that they were doing. And they were saying these things are so dry, no one's ever taking them in. They used Copilot to point at one of those sheets and say, create me a very basic presentation to show the points and the key things about this particular chemical or whatever, and it would create a little presentation. It was very visual, very easy for those people to then pick up and train from that. So Copilot from PowerPoint, really good way of kind of spinning out the start of a presentation. You can also then make it consolidate presentations, and also you can ask it to, for example, once you've created your presentation in PowerPoint, you can then go back to Copilot for Word and say, please create me a handout for this presentation, and point it back to the presentation, and it will make you some nice slide notes to give out to your attendees and that kind of thing. So you can start to see now, you start to add up how you can start to do some heavy lifting here across the different teams that you might have. Loop, there's probably a lot of you may, or hopefully some of you using Loop, but many of you may not be familiar with Loop. Loop is a way of kind of, again, dragging in different bits and pieces from Microsoft 365 all into one platform. Loop runs the meeting notes in Teams, by the way. So if you do use the agenda and note stuff in Teams, that's all powered by Loop. But yeah, with Copilot in Loop, again, you can kind of pull together lots of stuff, run recaps, create graphics and use designs and this kind of stuff. So again, Copilot is there within Loop. Copilot's in OneNote. As I said, it's in all the tools. You can use it here to ask questions about your notes. So if you do use OneNote and you're creating notebooks and pages, Copilot in OneNote can help you from summarizing your notes or generating new ideas off the back of the notes that you might have. So that's all the key Microsoft tools. I've going to give you a few quick example kind of use cases here where we see that Copilot can specifically help within charities. So the first one, and we touched on this when I was talking about the Word document side of things, grant writing and fundraising support. So I think the use case here is really sort of drafting compelling grant applications or donor communications. And some examples of how Copilot can support you here is you can use it to create those compelling grant applications. You can ask it to write in certain ways. So it's a bit like, again, if you've played around with ChatGPT and you ask it to write something that's quite convincing, it can write in such a manner. So by prompting this in the right way, you could say, for example, again, as I gave my example, here's the bid application framework. Please write me a really compelling case scenario why charity XYZ should be entitled to get X amount of funding, and you can give it the criteria, let it go away and write something. Again, I would caveat that you definitely want to check it, but also you probably want to just rewrite it in your tone of phrase. It's not bad at doing that, and again, the system is learning, so as it reads more of your style of writing and more of your data, the output should become better. But it's not perfect, and it certainly has a habit of doing things like Americanized English, so you'll get the Z's rather than the S's. So definitely worth a read and double check that it's good from that point of view. Very good for summarizing things. So again, if you've got a very, very big grant or bid document, summarize it down, ask Copilot to give you the critical points. Also, if you've created, we've used it in the past for doing tendering, where we've gone against a tender document, and you can say, here is the framework, here's what I've created, can you check that I've hit all the key points here? And it will again go through there and highlight, and it might highlight where you maybe have missed something that's crucial or missed something that might be important to the to the funders. So they're really useful for that. Donor communication. So it's really easy to use Copilot to help you generate more content for things like thank you emails, newsletters, blog posts as well for the website, all that kind of stuff. Using Copilot to do some of that heavy lifting just takes the time pressure away, and again helps you out with spreading your resources more widely. So next off, meeting summaries and action tracking. And the use case here, I think for volunteers and the part-time staff struggling to keep up with all the meetings, as we kind of touched on with the Copilot in Teams part. So using Copilot for 365, you can automatically generate those meeting summaries, just helping people to understand what's happening and keep track of things without having to necessarily sit and attend all the meetings. I think that's very useful. The fact that you can then extract things out from there. So again, Copilot will pick out things like the action points within the meeting. So typically, if you've said, can you do this, or I will do this, it will understand that that's an action, and it will note that action, and it will put in brackets the person that it thinks is responsible for the action. So it's very useful there to then pull out a list of things that need to be done and what you can do. And then you can put those tasks into Microsoft Planner or Microsoft To Do, again, to make sure you have a trackable follow-up, so you can start to improve your collaboration through the organization. Impact reporting. So for annual reports, trustee reports, data summaries, that kind of thing, using Copilot can help you turn some of that raw data into nice clear visuals. So you can ask Copilot to generate you the types of graphs that you want, make something look prettier. You can use it to help you write the narratives around that data. So again, if you have things like particular graphs and you want to present a particular narrative, you can present that to Copilot, tell it that you want to present this data in a certain way, write me up a report around this, and you can then use that to help you build out those reports. So for those of you that spend a lot of time generating and building out things like annual reports, trustee reports, Copilot can really help you with some of the heavy lifting there. And again, you can always then, once you've created your new one, compare it with the old one and ask Copilot some questions between the two to make sure you've covered off all the key points. And then compliance with standards. Again, if you feed Copilot the reference document, so you give it things like charity commission specific reporting requirements, or you give it a particular brief, it can make sure that your reporting aligns with that. And because it can go and search the internet, you can then caveat that around. So you could say, for example, produce me a report that meets a particular framework standard. You could reference that standard. It will go off and find that and read it, and then create that output. I think, again, I would always make sure that you do just sanity check what comes out. I think the biggest challenge with all of these AI tools is that they can do something called hallucination, where they will present something that's very, very plausible, but it might be wrong. So you do need to understand a little bit about your subject matter just to make sure that you can sense check the output from the AI. But say, using it to take that heavy lifting step, I think, is the real key point as where we're at the moment. A couple more for you, a couple more examples here. Email management. So again, we see this a lot with the nonprofits that we look after, the fact that there are limited amounts of admin staff and teams. If you have things like group email boxes, again, fundraising at, or the info at mailbox, it can become a little bit overwhelming with the amount of email and data in there. So using Copilot to kind of comb through that data, using it to help you summarize threads within emails, find certain things that are there. And you can also ask it to help you flag up key messages. So early on, when we were talking about that Copilot chat piece, that kind of chat box itself, you can get to that from Copilot within Windows itself. You can get to that from Copilot in Teams and a bunch of the other tools. And you can ask it there. You can say, for example, give me what do I need to know today? What's coming up in my day today? And it will go off and it will go, right, here's all the meetings you've got. Here's some key emails you need to reply to. You can ask it, for example, please give me 10 emails in my inbox that I haven't replied to that need a time critical response that I need to get back to today, for example, and it will go through them and it will comb through and it will pull those out of the inbox for you and highlight them, give you links that you can click to go to those emails. So again, as that productivity tool, that's really, really useful to help you get through that volume. And then training and onboarding volunteers. So if you're a charity or non-profit that has a high volunteer turnover, and maybe you have a lot that come in for particular projects, or you just have a lot that you need to bring in and on board, that's a difficult thing to deal with because you need to do a lot of retraining of people. You need to dedicate a lot of resources to doing that work. So again, some examples of how you can use Copilot there. You could, for example, create some quick start guides and checklists. So you could ask Copilot to create this for you within Word. You can, again, reference if you have a particular course or deliverable that you're doing as a project, point Copilot to that piece of information, ask it to create some summary documents or quick start guides to get people up to speed. You can get it to summarize policies and handbooks. So you can either get it to create those as documents, as we said. So again, pointing it to, for example, the company handbook and saying, give me the top 30 things I need to know from the company handbook. And you can create, again, a company handbook quick start guide. Or you can give people access to the Copilot chat, and then they can query it. So they can say, within our handbook, what is our parental leave policy? Off it goes, and it will find that for you. And then again, using it to create PowerPoint slides, so doing your inductions, you can use Copilot to help you build out those induction processes. Again, trying to streamline what you do, try and speed it up. You can just point it at those kind of things that you've already created and generate the new documents from it. So hopefully you're starting to feel this theme here, where it is really the key to the tool is to use it to take that heavy lifting and use the stuff you've already created and crafted and let it craft something new that then fits the bill for what you need. I'm going to skip this because I don't know if you can hear the audio, so bear with me. Let me just go forward to the next slide. So talking about the security side of things, just in case that video didn't play audio, so I forgot it was a video in there. The key things with Microsoft's AI principles, as I said earlier on, you can trust that Copilot does things the right way. So some of the key things here on the right-hand side of the screen is that your data is your data. So when you use Copilot, it's not used to train anything. So you may be aware that if you're using something like ChatGPT and you're not paying for it, so if you're using the amazing free one that they kind of give you for free, the trade-off of it being free is that they are learning from the things that you provide it and they are training the model. So what that means is that in the worst case scenario, you may put some confidential data into the something like ChatGPT, the free version, and then they're retaining that data, and it becomes part of the memory of the tool. And there have been examples where, particularly, I don't know non-profit examples, but I certainly know there's been corporate examples where in the early days of things like ChatGPT, people were putting in information about products that they were developing, and then competitors were able to ask ChatGPT, what's the specs on the new Samsung phone that hasn't been released yet, and it would spit that back out because someone had fed it the data. So it's really key to understand that when you're using Copilot 365, it's your data. It doesn't leave your environment. It doesn't go and train anybody else's system. So the protections wrap around that. So essentially, nothing that you have in your Copilot can be accessed by any of your competition, anybody else, anybody nefarious. But it is important also to say around that because Copilot as a sort of a tool ingests all the information that it can find for each user that it has a license for, it is important to make sure your permissions within your own Microsoft environment are correct. So for example, if you have let's take an example, you have a volunteer and they obviously probably don't have permission to see trustees information. They don't have permission to see probably CEO information or information around HR. As long as they can't access those documents, and so for example, they're in SharePoint and they're in a folder that that user does not have access to, if you put Copilot on for that user, then they still won't be able to get to that data. Copilot will only ingest for that user the data that it can find that user has access to. However, if you have things misconfigured, and say, for example, your users potentially do have access to an HR folder, maybe you didn't know this, maybe you didn't know it was misconfigured, there is the chance then that Copilot can go and ingest that data and present that back to the user. So it is quite important before you go whole hog down the route with these things, is just to almost have a bit of a kind of a review and a bit of a check over your own housekeeping internally to make sure that you've got permissions set up correctly, that people aren't accessing everything they shouldn't be. The common problem we see again is where people have, for example, one big shared area. Might be a big shared SharePoint that's open to everybody. And there's lots and lots and lots of data in there, and lots of people are storing stuff in there in little folders within there. And again, that's potentially, people could access that already, but Copilot will make it easier to surface that information. So you just have to have a bit of a kind of a pre-audit before you go down the route of doing that. But I say the data is protected. That's the AI principles. Microsoft do have copyright guardrails built into the product. So again, because it's not learning, it's only learning for you from your data. Copyright concerns are not there in terms of it learning or stealing or copying anything that you've done. But they have built in specific kind of copyright concerns around the tool itself, from the stuff that you've heard of recently around people worrying from a creative perspective that AI is going to start to steal their creativity. There are, again, Microsoft's got a kind of commitment on the copyright framework around that. So from an overall, in fact, I'll tell you what, I'm going to give you a very, very quick live demo of something actually, because before we go to the next steps and resources. So I'm just going to show you, there is another tool, and this is one that I can show you. So I'm just bringing it up on screen, bear with me. There is a tool called Microsoft Whiteboard. It is a Windows app, and it is it's literally a whiteboard. So you may or may not have seen it before. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a new whiteboard. So Whiteboard, you can find as an application within your in Windows. If you're on Windows 10 or 11, if you go to the App Store and search for Whiteboard, it's literally a thing where you can drop sticky notes and build things out. So it's probably the least kind of connected of the 365 tools in that respect. But if you log into it with your Microsoft account and you do have a Copilot license like I do, then you'll get a Copilot button here. And what you can do here with Whiteboard is it's quite good as a brainstorming example. So I'm going to give you a really quick demo as to how this might work. So I press the Copilot button here, and I'm asking it to suggest content. So for my whiteboard, for example, I am going to take an example that we are a charity that supports children in poverty. Please provide me with some novel fundraising ideas that we can offer to our supporters to help us raise money. And this is a live demo, so it might all go horribly wrong, but we'll see what happens here, and we'll see what it does. So it's going away, it's creating a draft, it's coming up with a few ideas here. So I think, okay, I quite like those. I want to generate some more. I'll say it is a bit American, so matching gift drives, yard sales, it's a bit American. That's fine. We can tweak the wording, generate a few more. It do 6 at a time. So we've got 18 there. I quite like all of those. That's fine. I'm going to go with that. Let me put those in. There we go. Right. So now I've got my to-do. I've got my initial ideas. What I want to do now is I need to understand, potentially I want to categorize those. So if I hit categorize again, you can AI categorize these notes. And what it will do is it will come up with what it thinks maybe are some good categories. And you don't have to give it any kind of framework around that, but as you can see, by categorizing that, I'm going to keep that. What it's done now is it's split those into different types of events. So it's gone, here's some virtual events. These are the in-person fundraisers. These are creative fundraising. These are corporate giving. So immediately, without having to use any brain power, and it's not really anything I know a lot about, you can see I've generated something here. Now, those of you on the webinar that know more about charity fundraising are probably going to look at that and go, a lot of that's nonsense. But as you can see, there might be some good stuff in there. And that was super simple. That took me 2 minutes. And you can just play around with these things. You can, again, you can ask it to summarize that out. So if I do summarize here, it's going to go and create a bit of a loop board here, and it will pull in just a bit of summary about what we've done and create pull in the screenshot of this as well. So we'll see in a second what it will do. So if we were actually having this as a whiteboard session, you can actually share the whiteboard. So you'd probably invite team members into this. It would then show you all the participants of the whiteboard, talk about the ideas that are generated, the theme of the whiteboarding session, and it grabs a screenshot there. So you can see, really quick summary. That's just a really very quick, simple demo as to kind of the basic power of Copilot and where it can really help you to spin things out quickly. So key things I wanted to say for those of you again that are here on the webinar, or for those of you that watch it later, we're happy for you to schedule up a Copilot assessment with us so we can actually run a readiness assessment to help you identify what you can do, but also provide you with a kind of a bit of a demo that's more tailored around what you're wanting to achieve. Those are free of charge. So again, we'd be happy to help anybody that wants to have a Copilot assessment to run those. These bits here are links. So what I will do is I will share those with Sarah after the call so that you can have a look at some of these things. But the key things here from these links are there's a community hub around Copilot, and that's a really, really useful place to go and understand if you do purchase a license, for example, how do I use it? How do I start the implementation of this within my team? There's a huge amount of online resource around what they call prompting. So prompting is essentially the language that you use to ask for what you want from the tool. And by crafting very, very specific types of prompts, you can get certain types of outputs. So there are whole kind of online resources and workshops around how you build out great prompting. And then there's some brilliant learning paths as well from Microsoft. So Microsoft have really got a lot of resources around this. Microsoft have kind of, I wouldn't say they bet the house on it, but they've put a lot of money behind Copilot and they are really pushing it. And so hopefully as an overview, that's kind of giving you a few ideas of what you can do there. So thank you very much for your time on this today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can have a look if there's been any questions.
Craig, thank you so much. Sometimes I forget I'm hosting these webinars because I'm so engrossed in listening and making notes that I think, oh, I need to come on now. So that was brilliant. I think the data privacy bit that you spoke about was very interesting, specifically when you're on SharePoint. You know, we use SharePoint here at the Chamber, and the ability to, you know, still have that sensitive data on there that's not accessible to everyone. I thought that was really interesting, along with everything else. I love the whiteboard. I personally have not used that, but I've just written that down as a.
Do you know what? It's a tool that
brilliant,
barely anybody knows is there. And actually,
yeah.
again, if you've got a Microsoft 365 license, you can do whiteboarding sessions virtually across everybody. You can invite people in, and you can do ideas sharing. You can all draw on the whiteboard. Yeah, it's quite
Brilliant.
cool. But
Really good. Total top takeaway there.
there you go.
We haven't had any questions, and I think everyone, it's been such an amazing amount of information that everyone is just, you know. So last shout if anyone does have any questions, but as Craig did allude to, we do have a question. We have a question. As probably, you know, charities are they maybe just one step behind on a software package. They've got Office 2016. Are they going to be able to get any benefits?
So yes and no, and let me answer that and caveat why. So this Copilot subscription kind of works alongside your data that needs to live in Microsoft 365. So for some charities, quite a few of the ones that we work alongside, they are using 365, for example, for their emails and for their data. They maybe are only using the email side, so maybe they're like Joanne said, they're using a software package like Office 2016, which is a set version. Can you use Copilot? Yes, you can buy a license, and what you will get is you can use the web chat part, and you will be able to chat and interrogate your emails that are there. If you log into kind of Outlook on the web, you can use the Copilot tool in there. To access the data and the things that are within your Office environment, you'll need to start to put those into OneDrive or SharePoint, which again, you may or may not have a license for, depending on what your charity currently does. So if you're currently storing everything on kind of a traditional server in the office and you're using Office 2016 and really you're not in the cloud with the data, you're going to get very little value as it stands from Copilot. But I think it's something to then look at and consider, is there value in a bigger digital transformation of saying, let's now get this to the cloud? There are challenges you'll have around things like 2016 Office that it's kind of unsupported after a certain period of time. And Microsoft have kind of moved away from the kind of the traditional boxed products. So I think we're almost in the final years now where you can still buy these standalone versions, and eventually that will be a gone thing, and we're all going to have to subscribe and pay money every month, unfortunately. So eventually you'll end up kind of having to be within that environment, and then you'll get more value. But yeah, if you're kind of physically on premises, it's a little bit less beneficial, I guess.
Thank you, Craig. And just about the cost, I know we chatted about that, but we started the webinar. So Copilot free as part of the Microsoft 365 package?
Yeah, so Copilot free is you get you can get Copilot at the moment from, if you just go to, if you go search for Copilot, there is the web version, and that is free. There is some data protection around that, so it's not quite the same as using ChatGPT for free, because it does then give you data protection. But the freebie one that you'll find can't access any of your data. So the one that you pay for, that's the one that gives it that kind of heavy lifting ability to go and grab all of your information and do all the smart stuff. So Copilot free is very much like ChatGPT. If you've used that, it will do some clever stuff, but it won't access your data. The Copilot for 365 is the one that can do the heavy lifting, because it can access all of your stuff. And there is non-profit pricing. I was trying to find it in the background, and I haven't been able to pull it up at this minute. I will find it for you and I'll send it out there. But give you an idea, the actual paid for, like the price that those of us that aren't non-profits pay is about £275 a year plus VAT for it. 277, I think. The non-profit discount, I believe, is not quite as significant as other Microsoft tools. So with Microsoft, normally they do about 75% off. They don't for Copilot, because it is a very expensive resource for them. But I think from memory, it's around 20 to 25% off of that. So it is still an expensive tool to run. But when you consider, again, if you're paying for resources, then that can really help you scale out. So it's one of those things. And what we're finding, to just add a very quick point to that, actually, is we're finding that the best implementation, that the non-profits we work with, where they're using this, the worst thing you can possibly do is go and get a license for everybody, because you'll find that there's a lot of people in the organization that just don't get the value. So we normally suggest you go and get one or two, try it with the people that are either, say, the fundraisers or the CEO, or the people that are doing a lot of heavy lifting stuff. Free some of their time up first, get them to become advocates of it, and then start to look at how you roll it out across the organization.
That's a good idea. Perfect. Thank you very much. Well, thank you. Look at that. Spot on time. Thank you so much, Craig, for joining us today. Oh, no, we have another. Oh, no. Thank you. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Joe.
Lovely to have you all. As I said, we've recorded this, so we will get that downloaded after this and sent out. And then Craig said he will kindly share some of the links.
I'll share some links around.
Brilliant. So I'll pop that in the email too. But just reminds me to say thank you very much. Lovely to see you all. And we'll catch up again soon. And thank you, Craig. Take care.
Sarah. Thanks all. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.